Chris, I think you just need to unmute yourself. Okay. Can you hear us, Martin?
Yes, I've got you guys. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Chris is probably gone off from his desk for the last minute coffee or something and stuff like that. Yes, indeed. That's what I reckon.
Are you there, Chris? If you are there, Chris, I can see that you're muted. If you can unmute yourself. Put your audio off.
Maybe just taking the last minute phone call.
Oh, how about now? I was trying to do something fancy in the settings of the computer and it turned out it was just a shortcut on the bloody screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we've all been there, Chris. Good morning.
Morning.
I think we're all here. It is 11 o'clock. I will get things underway. Morning, everybody. My pleasure to open this meeting of the Council's Audit and Risk Committee. So we'll go through item 1, and we've got Chris and Martin online remotely. That all should work smoothly. Rebecca's going to make sure that everything technically.
Ros.
Okay. Ros is going to make sure everything works smoothly. And we'll try and keep an eye on the screen. And Ros, if you let me know if there's something that I need to interrupt or stop. Let's get underway. Present today, item 1.1. I'm particularly pleased to meet Yoshi, and I'm glad Yoshi's with the council and with us this morning. So you speak up if you've got any queries or comments or any issues that you'd like to improve. And we're happy to allow you to speak. We don't have other council members here as guests at this stage. We do have all of the members of the Audit Committee with us. So we've got me, Stephen, and Councillor Dan, myself, Chris Kelly as independent members, and we are going to talk with Martin afterwards about where we're at with the other member of the committee, if that's the case. So we're all present, I think, all we can be. There's no apologies. I'll move to 1.3, the disclosure of conflict of interest. If there are any conflicts of interest, let us know now or when we get to an item if you forget. Nothing's being disclosed at this stage. Confidential provisions. I don't think there's anything to discuss in conflict at this point in time. We'll move to item 2, the minutes of our previous meeting, which was back in 18th February. I hope that it will be greener today than it was on the 18th of February, but it didn't look like. No, unfortunately, I like normally the changes every time you go here, but not this time. Minutes of last time. Is there someone prepared to confirm those minutes as correct? Councillor Dan, is there a second amendment? Stephen, no discussion, Chris? If not,
No, all good.
I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried. That takes us to the minutes of to the action list from last time. Just a couple of little comments about that. There's a couple of things that are listed. The 27th September meeting, item 3.6, draft for internal financial controls, talking about a draft report to be presented to a meeting. I guess we've sort of, is that, there is something on the agenda about that.
There
isn't
is,
So
yes.
we've got that one covered. 3.4 was asset revaluation of transport and community wastewater systems. The notes talk about item 3, notes that all other classes of assets will be revalued in 24-25. Then in the comments further on, it talks about verbal report provided that remaining assets to be split over the next 2 years to report to be presented in August 25. I just wonder, are we up to date with the revaluation? Is something going to happen this year that is not going to happen? Or?
Yeah, we might defer to Martin on that one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the buildings and structures have just finished being valued at the moment, so hence the delay with the final budget presentation. With the stormwater, we'll push through into next financial year to be completed then.
Okay. Thank you for that, Martin. I'll get Rod just make a note if you can do that in minutes, just so I can remember in 3 months' time what we were planning to do. That would be good. I don't think there's anything else for that. Is there anyone else have any queries with the action list?
Yes, I do. So I just wanted to confirm, when would we be expecting to see any risks with the extreme residual risk rating? Because remember we had that discussion where we'd see them at every meeting. Would that be after we get the framework updates, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So once the updates are completed, correct, you will get it. The commitment in the interim was that if there's anything that needed to be brought to the committee, it would be. And at this point, we don't have anything at this stage that needs to be brought to the attention of the committee.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris and Martin. Okay, if there's nothing else, members, there's a recommendation at 2.2, receive no report, note the updates provided with the action plan. Mayor Stevens, seconded. Councillor Van, no further discussion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. So that takes us to 2.2. We've got 2.3, the work program for 24-25. Yes, is there any comments or questions, members? And the other one I had, again, you actually there's a couple of items listed as agenda items for this meeting that aren't here. I had to speak with Martin briefly yesterday. 16, 17, 18, 19, 23, 24, etc. So I just wondered, I'll back this by one time to. We're a little bit behind on a couple of those, a couple more, 6, 3, 6, 4, and 5, 4. I'm assuming we're a little bit behind with various things, but they're all in hand and under control, more or less, Yoshi or Martin or Ross.
Whether Martin wanted to speak to that more, but I believe there's the potential for a special meeting once some of those items are closer to being finished. John?
Yes, I said Martin indicated that to me yesterday. Martin?
Yeah. So I'm happy to speak to that through the chair. It's been mainly the building revaluation that's held the process up. So the other work is almost near completion. So I'd envisage that will be provided within the next 1 to 2 weeks so that we can have a special meeting of the committee to be able to review them prior to being provided to the chamber for consideration for consultation.
Okay, thank you. I know you're new to this, but where something was listed to be done and it's not done for this meeting, I think we just need an update in the comments. So, you know, that was planned in the agenda item, as it turned out it wasn't the agenda item. So we just need to get a little bit clearer in the work program in terms of where we're at and what's proposed. And there's a couple of earlier ones in December and March where there's just an X, and I think X means, well, we did look at it when we said we would, but we probably need a bit more than X. Is it been completed, or is there something further to follow up? Yeah. Any other comments or questions, members?
Nothing from me.
Thanks, Chris. If not, I put that recommendation, receiving those reports. Have to move it. And Stephen, second, Councillor Dan. All those in favour? Chris has got his hand up, I think.
Sorry, yeah, I'm having camera issues, but assume I support it unless I dissent.
That's what I'm going to work on. Thank you, Chris.
With just mentioning to Martin that Chris, we can't actually see them.
Say
the same thing. Yeah, they might think we can see them.
Yes, and Councillor Dan just mentioned that the cameras aren't on with either of you, and it would probably be helpful for us, at least when you're speaking, to have the camera on, if you can.
Yep. So, Ros, you'll need to go in and allow the cameras on the system, please.
Yeah, I think I'm not getting that option, and I'm on my son's computer, so that may be an issue too.
Yeah, no, it needs to be allowed from the Mount Remarkable end, just because it's a public meeting.
Okay. Roger, having a look at that, we'll keep moving while she see if you can make that adjustment. Thank you for raising that. We'll keep going. So the next item on the agenda is 3.1, which is the third budget review for the year. There's a report there from Joshi. Did you want to make any comment, Joshi, about the report, or just leave it open for discussion?
I believe it open for discussion, or for remark if you had something specific you wanted to contribute.
Mark, any comments from you?
I think probably nothing significant to highlight. You can see that obviously the income from the Port Germain Caravan Park is starting to be reflected there and having an impact obviously on that adjusted operating deficit. And there's a couple of other shuffles there in terms of budget lines that will be reallocated from savings from the finance consultant across into other contractors to cover off some other contract work that's been done. But other than that, no significant material changes.
It looked pretty straightforward to me, and the council tracking in a position pretty close to where it expected it to be. Just a minor comment from me. When you talk, Yoshi, on the second page, actual results to 30 April, I noticed in the case of Port Germain, you talk about numbers. Those other documents didn't have any dollars in them, and it was a bit hard to work out are they significant issues or not. I'm just saying you always useful to mention a dollar value so we know we need to focus on this one or not. Any other comments? I know Chris had a Dan first, then I'll come back to Chris. Oh, Chris, you raised something with me yesterday.
Okay, you can hear me, and can you see me now?
Chris, all good.
Okay.
You.
Oh, okay. I've turned the camera on at my end.
Our IT expertise is here trying to get the pictures up.
Okay, all right. I'll carry on nonetheless. So yeah, the first point I made was just in relation to that column on the right-hand side on page 22. It seemed to put some variances in, but not others. I mean, they were evident in the actual main body of the financial statements, but it just didn't seem to call out all of the changes, unless I'm reading that wrong. It called out the changes, I think, in consultants and staff, but not in the caravan park movements. Just on the right-hand side there, so where you've seen movements in user charges, I think it is, and materials and services, you say you've got a net movement of 12 when you've actually got a net movement of 270 odd. Yeah, I just wondered kind of whether or not I'm either reading that wrong or it's kind of we put some of the variances in but not the others.
I just think that so only some of the ones that moved around in the proposed budget variances, a lot of that is contractors to contractors, so it's kind of an apples to apples. That's why it's a wash. The one that shows up to 12,000 identified, that's the change from contractors to payroll, And so that's why you see that change there in the decrease of 12,000 from materials, contracting expenses over to employee costs. A lot of the others are just kind of a wash from shifting from one set of contractors to finance contractors to other ones like general governance and admin ones.
Okay, so it's movement between line items as opposed to variances.
Correct.
Okay.
So like the only one that actually changes not apples to apples is going from contractors to employee costs. And that's where you see that $12,000 change between those two line items.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Okay. I see what I understand your explanation. The title was a bit misleading, but that's okay. At the end of the day, it all made sense. So that was, I think,
the 12,000 materials contract on the adjustment to the required budget. We've gone from 4,358 to 4,625. Is our forecast.
I'm sorry, where is this?
Materials, under expenses, materials, contracts and other, 4,358 to 4,625. How do we get that 12,000 there?
I think the explanation was that it's the movement. What's indicated in that last column is the movement between line items, not the net movement in the budget. So that's what I took the explanation to mean. So because when you're adding in expenditure and adding in revenue because it's volume driven, well, that doesn't actually require a movement between line items, whereas that other switch between employee costs and consultants did actually require a movement between line items. So I don't know, maybe the title of the column needs to change or something just to make it a bit clearer what's meant by that. I don't know.
Okay. That's the title. Yes, I think I see the part you're talking about now, that there is that difference between the budget review 2 and budget review 3, and that's driven by the Port Germain Caravan Park, because the Port Germain Caravan Park budget that was adopted in that same month, February, after the last Audit Risk Committee report, the Port Germain Caravan budget was not formally within the budget review 2 process as the changes and variances that were submitted for approval. And so those are implemented outside of that process. That's why it's not showing. That's why it's there, the difference between budget review 2 and 3. But as far as it could, I see what you mean. It could be a little misleading. It's not the difference between those two, but the adjustment required. And those are the currently proposed variances.
If you look at the income, there's a number of minor figures that are different, but you've got nothing in the adjustment. And right. I think we just need to change the label for, to me, and what would be more common would be to make sure that the last column is between BR2 and BR3.
I see your point. I made a note of that.
Chris, sorry, you had something else?
No, I think that was it from me. John, I don't think I had anything else to go.
Oh, I interrupted you. Members, is there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, John. And it's not a query about reporting off. It's just an item for discussion now or another time, whatever you think. And I'm just looking at page 19, the first dot point under actual results, and the matter of all of the rates that are invoiced is assumed to be. So there's two parts to that. They're sort of assumed to be paid when the invoice goes out.
Yep.
But they're also assumed to be 100% paid. Something that we've discussed in our council meetings before, and the mayor and I've discussed it. So fully understand that it's completely accurate based on the way it's done. But I just thought in ARC, maybe it's worth having a conversation about, is that the best way to do it? Do we really think that every single year we will get 100% of our rates paid? Answer is probably no. Understand we've been receiving an outstanding debt policy. Now I know what the right number is.
And the right accounting, and Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, is you are required under accrual accounting to show the full amount.
Yep.
You've raised an invoice. Legally, you're entitled to that money, so you report it under the accounting. If you thought there was a doubt you were going to get paid, you'd increase your line, the offset line for arrears. So if we think the budget allocation for arrears is too low, then we'd expect an adjustment. That's where we're at.
I understand. So the reporting is this, right? It's just, you know, the mayor and I were talking about this particularly in the context of drought. Saying, well, you know, and don't worry about these numbers, but let's say if we always get 98% of our rates paid, maybe now we're going to get, you know, 88% of our rates paid on time.
Yeah.
We hope we'll get them all eventually down the track. But whether it's even just a note or just something attached to the financials, it just indicates.
I think it's an issue for like accounting purposes for financial decision making, but also for political understanding of what's happening out there. It's useful for council members. I'm probably of the view that it's not a major issue for accounting, because even if you didn't get money in, let's assume all other things being equal, you didn't have enough cash, you could effectively do, theoretically, raise some additional borrowings, and the cost of the borrowings would be offset by the interest charges, theoretically, you charge on the arrears. So from a cash flow point of view, it's managed, but it's more the politics or the community understanding of the issues.
So just sort of,
yeah, I agree.
whether it's just a note that says, you know,
arrears are bigger than we expected them to be because blah, blah, blah. I mean, the other thing I would say, Councillor Ben, my experience, I understand the point you make about drought, and we need to be cognizant of that. My view, though, is typically, if you manage, and we're going to talk about debt recovery later, but if you manage debt recovery sensitively, proactively, it's less of a problem. Where councils have big arrears is because they haven't managed it well, more so than presenting decisions.
good strong focus here.
Exactly. Okay, so perhaps the suggestion would be just a little note with financials about how the arrears are tracking, and the budget adjustment required, etc.
Well, it's probably not a budget adjustment.
No,
But it's just about, you know,
yeah.
You know, just a note that makes it really clear, and I am, to be quite blunt, thinking of not only this time, but other councillors and a whole range of things. It just makes it say that we're quite appropriately accounting to receive all this money at this point in time. Let's say right now we've received 80% of it. Actually, it's just a note would be handy, I think.
The one that concerns me more, like traditionally, on that similar topic is I've heard many councils over the years that can't increase rates this year because of adverse farming conditions. But next year, when it's good conditions, they don't necessarily do a catch up.
We can't speak for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be, yeah. Okay. Chris, any comments from you before we move on? Or Martin? Okay, we've got the budget review there, so we've met the legislation. We seem to be travelling in accordance with what we had planned. There's a report received, and the report recommending council adopt the budget variations outlined in this report. We have a mover. Mayor McCarthy against Mayor Stephen, seconded Councillor Bang. No discussion, all those in favour? Carried. That deals with item 3.1. Next report is 3.2. Acting Chief Executive Officer is the update report of miscellaneous updates. Martin, any comments you wish to make?
Nothing of any significance other than just to give you an idea of some of the background work that obviously, you know, we're all seeing the results of. But just to, just some general updates in terms of bringing audit and risk up to speed with some of the initiatives that are now starting and will continue to deliver into the next budget as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Mayor Stephen.
Yeah, just a point of interest here, and possibly for other people that are not privy to what we're doing in here. So on page 28, second paragraph, with the increased staffing, it's just worth noting that it's an increase in staffing as external supports and business processes have been brought back in-house. So it's not an increase in net staff across the board. It's actually an exchange point there. But for Chris to understand.
Thank you, Mayor Stephen.
Sorry, can I just say something in response to that? Thank you for the update, and it's quite heartening from one regional local government to another that you've been able to bring those roles back in house and back into the community. More importantly, so I think that's a really good outcome for the community and for the council, and gets you closer to fully utilising your FTE allocation. So well done.
Thank you.
And Mark, the only little one I had, second paragraph on page 27, the interest rate one. I don't think those words are quite right. The review and rationalisation of council plant equipment commenced in earnest. The value of this work supporting a reduction in the proposed interest rate increase. I don't understand what that means.
I think it's just a typo.
I
think it should say council rate rather than interest rate.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's right, easy to do.
I know there was a banks meeting today, and I didn't think you had as much interest rates as it does. But yeah,
Hey, look, you never know the circles Mount Remarkable is mixing in, Mr. Chair.
fair comment. Members, if there's nothing, councillor Ben, sorry.
Probably just a little housekeeping. We just need to keep that in mind for this same paper going to tonight's council.
Oh, that's why I wrote it. Yeah.
But can I just add to what Chris was saying? I think this is a great, nice to just have a little miscellaneous report every now and again, Martin. I appreciate that a lot. And I wanted to just add my congratulations to you and your team with regard to the asset management, asset rationalisation, with a focus to maintain services simultaneously as well as possible. There are always lots and lots of good things going on at any one point in time, but I see that as a really outstanding contribution that you and your team are making at the moment. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, a point worth noting, because there's plenty of councils who do similar. I know there's always headaches with doing it, but no, it's good to see. Members, if there's nothing else with item 3.2, there's a recommendation we received a note of the report. Mayor Stevens moving, Chris Kelly seconding. I'll put that in motion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 3.2, we'll move to item 3.3, which is the IT disaster recovery plan. Does anyone wish to speak to this? I know Chris had a query, but any comments before we go for it?
I just a quick one which I clarified with Martin, that all costs associated with this are actually within current contractual arrangements. It's not additional costs expected from this strategy.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, I hadn't read this report when I spoke with you yesterday, but I did read it afterwards, and I think I share your point of view.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a read through it, and I struggled to understand what the purpose of this particular document is. It seems to me that where the detail that officers would lean into in the case of some sort of IT disaster is actually referenced in the covering report, so the disaster recovery procedure, and also a mention of a comprehensive IT disaster recovery plan with all the relevant contact information and supplier information and all of that sort of thing. But this which is what I would be expecting to see in a disaster recovery plan, but this document in particular reads more like a document that is the rationale for having one rather than actually, and how to do one rather than actually the plan itself. So I guess if those other documents exist, as is referenced in the covering report, I'm reasonably comfortable with that, and I'm not sure that it's appropriate that they come in front of this committee and we pull them apart and pretend that we're IT experts. But I guess I got two questions is the bottom line. One is, what's the purpose of this document that you've put in front of us relative to the other documents that you've referenced? And secondly, have those documents that you have referenced, have they been peer reviewed by your insurers or local government association or cybersecurity people in the South Australian government or something like that, just to give yourself some comfort that you're on the right track there?
Yeah, thank you. So the answer to the peer review, yes, they have been. So this document's driven by our risk services as a requirement of our insurers in terms of having this in place. They've driven the other two documents as well, and also they've been developed and peer reviewed by a new managed service provider as well to make sure the capacity and the responsiveness is consistent with what the managed service provider is able to deliver. There's a component of this that forms part of our annual insurance in terms of the response that local government risk services will deliver as well. So there's a local government risk service side of it, and then this is the more briefly in terms of the council side of things.
Okay. Is there a regular testing requirement? Are we meeting that?
Yeah, so we do monthly integrity testing with our current service provider. There's only quarterlies required by our insurance and the schemes. But also there's another cyber intelligence program that we've just signed up to on the back of our recent renewal conversation, where we'll be looking to increase that level of maturity even more so in terms of some of our penetration testing.
Okay, cool. All right.
So, Martin, just help me a little bit more, because Chris raised this with me yesterday, and I read it a bit more carefully than I perhaps otherwise would have afterwards. I thought, I think he's right. To me, this reads like a plan for a plan.
Yep.
And that's fine, but this wasn't what I was expecting. The other documents have been done and are kept up to date. So this document that you are calling the disaster recovery plan, it meets the guidance of local government risk services, does it?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy then. We don't need to change the heading, but I do think we probably need to perhaps put a few extra words in the resolution just so it's a bit clearer that this is a sort of my language, a plan for a plan, and the other documents have been, the CEO advised us that the other documents have been developed and are up to date and have been verified or confirmed with the local government risk services. Is that reasonable, Martin?
Yes, happy with that.
Okay, are other people comfortable with that idea? I just need a little bit more flesh. I'm happy not to try and get those words right now, but Roz and Martin perhaps can have a look at something and we'll have a look.
Get it back to you.
Get the words right.
Okay. It's a disaster recovery pathway.
Yeah, that's exactly
something like
that's
that.
what I was.
It's not the plan.
I had the process. I had the pathway works. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Chris, are you okay with all that?
I'm okay with all of that, but I just had one other question. Just in relation to that other documentation, does it cover off on privacy breaches as well as, hacking and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so it goes right down to one, it links in with the State Records Act for storage of data, but also goes into the retention and storage of like credit card details and people's personal information as well. So yes, it covers off on all of that.
Okay, cool. All right.
Okay, thank you. So look, we've got I'm suggesting a resolution that picks up on this, receive a note report, endorse the DCMA remarkable draft IT disaster recovery plan subject to, and we can put a little bit, I think it probably needs a paragraph that I'm happy for Roz and Martin to work on, and perhaps if you want to send me an email, Chris is far more expert than I am on this issue. Send it to all of us if you like. Chris will have to do is, we want to make sure that effectively you've covered the details that we want to see. It's almost the action that's taken up this, and yes, you have, and it's all being verified and will be used as a plan to do certain actions thereafter.
Happy with that.
I'll put that motion then, that proposed motion. Councillor Dan is moving it and Chris is seconding it. All those in favour? Carried, I think. Chris will assume he had his hand up. Thank you, Chris. Carried. We'll move on. Which takes us to item 3.4, internal control manual and business continuity plan updates. Again, does staff have any comments before we discuss further? Nothing from staff. If not, members, any questions, queries, comments?
I think this paper's really just seems to have got one yet. So is that,
Yes, you're right.
it's just an explanation why it's not ready yet, and it's still coming.
That's exactly right. So the next one I was anticipating. Yes, you're right. No questions, no comments, members. Please recommend that. Yes,
I did touch on this with Martin Brecker this morning, but at point 5 in the third paragraph, in the addition with the impending restructure due to a vacancy of a senior position, I just perhaps amend that because we go out. In addition to the impending internal personnel roles and responsibilities restructure, and take out the vacancy of a senior position. I don't know that we actually have that clarity yet, do we, Martin?
Not at this point, no.
I'll be guided by you on this one, but I just think I'd like to see that a little bit removed.
Okay, so we've got a report here. Is this report going to anyone else, or are you talking about?
No, it's public document.
Yes, I know. Change the public document for perspective.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do whatever you. It's a minor issue, Martin. I'm in your hands. What you want to do? We could either put a resolution.
Sure. So I'm happy to amend it with consent to just amend that paragraph to reflect the internal restructure and just remove vacancy of senior position.
Okay, are we all comfortable with that?
Can I just suggest?
I'm fine with it.
So I think what you suggest is fine, and maybe even easier way is just get rid of everything, before the comma in that sentence, and just starts with some delegations may be redistributed. I mean, that lasts forever. That's sort of always there. So the sentence just starts with some, and then replace may where will is.
Yeah.
And I think we're
okay.
So
the answer is, Mark, we're in your hands. We're happy for you to make minor edits to this report that doesn't change what you're saying. And
Thank you.
Work out. Yep. Members, with that little adjustment to the report, someone prepared to receive, move the recommendation. Councillor Dan is, Chris is second. If nothing else, all those in favour? Carry. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 3.5. I know this was one of Councillor Dan's favourites and mine as well. I've been keen on this concept for a long while. So, any discussion? Councillor Dan, you raised this issue originally.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to Martin for bringing this back. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward paper, and I appreciate the directness and the simplicity of it. I have one question and then potentially a suggestion. In that second recommendation, the audit committee recommends council people just top revaluation, you undertake a reconstruction property, etc. I'm fully on board with the principle of that. But if property means land, then, and it might be different in local government, but there's no depreciation on land. So if property means land, which I think it probably does, then we probably need to adjust that recommendation, unless there's something different that happens in local government that I'm not aware of, but I doubt it.
Okay, I can answer your question. Property is broader than just land. It will include a site with development on it.
That's right. So maybe we need to just change property to capital assets or
improvements. But that's right. So you're suggesting that you don't see the value increasing the land?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if we have a block of land with nothing on it, we've got a block of land with building on it,
yes,
we're going to show depreciation attached to the building on one of those properties,
yes,
but no depreciation for the other property.
yes. understand.
So should we adjust that or not?
Look, the answer is you are going to have to adjust the value of the land at some point in time when it's revalued. It has no impact on depreciation, you're right, but it does mean your assets in your balance sheet are effectively lower than their market rate. I think the simplest answer is basically to index everything, otherwise you've got some problems with why this one, politics. I would just increase everything, including land, and when you do the formal revaluations, it might be up or down thereafter.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're saying then index everything, which I agree with entirely. And when it says in order to ensure that depreciation expense, etc. Well, if there's no depreciation, it just won't flow. Okay. Yeah.
FX provision in brackets where applicable.
Okay.
That's a fair point. If there's nothing else, members, look, a couple of things. This has been a hobby horse of mine for a long while. I want to emphasise that people know that I do a little bit of work to help SCOSA with its annual review of councils. I was thinking to Yoshi before the meeting, your council is going to be reviewed by SCOSA this year. I won't be seeing their draft report because of my role with the committee, but SCOSA has been keen on the concept of revaluing assets using what's called desktop review indexation factor in between valuations. So it's issued some guidance recently. I sent you a copy of that, Martin, a couple of months ago. So one of the things it's recommending is that all councils do exactly what your report is suggesting, because there can be a gap between valuations and depreciation is effectively understated. That's the main issue, I agree. So I do think we want to do indexation. I think it would be in your own best interests to see if you can do that indexation for 30 June this year. I'm not sure why you couldn't. It's just applying an indexation factor to your written down values. A couple of things though, so I think SCOSA would be impressed, and it might help for some broader things to think that, yes, they're on top of these issues, they're trying to be proactive and get everything, all of that lined up. So I think it's a good thing to do as quickly as possible. So I'd probably be suggesting as part of the resolution, we do it for 24-25 if possible. That would be on my first point. My second point is any indexation using a generally applicable index like CPI, in my view, is better than doing nothing. I think there are better indices though than CPI. The ABS, Australian Bureau of Stats, produces a cost construction index, and you would normally probably use that for your capital works. The cost construction index in recent years has been going up at a higher rate than CPI, particularly since COVID, because of the demands on the construction industry at the moment. My suggestion to you would be to consult with your auditor and work out what, if you want to do it by CPI this year, because it's quick and dirty and simple. If the auditor's happy, I'm not going to complain, but the auditor might also want something. What the guidance says is basically to use an applicable index. The accounting standards don't disallow it. They don't, so they're relatively silent. If you don't disallow it, but they want you to use an applicable index. So the onus will be on, well, we think CPI is generally applicable. Well, maybe it's a better one, and the auditor might raise that same query. So I'll leave that with you to work out. So I'm going to say the resolution, I would like to see it amended to have a suitable index. So I'm happy to leave the plain case of what's suitable index, and I'd like to have 24-25, if practical, in the resolution.
I think that's very good advice, and happy to there with support resolution. I also just wanted to point out that Martin did actually touch on that. I forget the word you used, Martin, but you were talking about sort of a compartmentalised indexation where properties, may be a bit of this and a bit of that. I can't remember
Yeah.
exactly what you referred to, but essentially in that line, that does address what you're talking about with regard to using the right revaluation indicator for the right property.
If you say suitable index, if an asset has a component of something that's very different, something else, I don't have a problem using two different indices where you can justify doing it. So get it as good as you can. Martin, are you happy with all that?
Yes, no, more than comfortable. Thank you.
So Chris is okay.
Yeah, so I just to comment on that, John. Yeah, I agree with that approach. I mean, my experience has been that councils that do their own capital works, there's potentially value in using a blend of. So when I say do their own capital works, as in insource some of the work, there's a value in using maybe a blend between wage price index and cost of materials and so forth. But if the council's largely outsourcing that work, well then I would suggest heavily leaning into that index. And then obviously sitting outside the depreciation space, you've got other drivers like the more hit your OPEX, like cost of chemicals, cost of electricity, insurance, all those sorts of things. But I think I support your approach. Obviously subject to compliance with the accounting standards and the comfort level of the auditors, and obviously how council delivers these things to probably needs to be taken into account there to see if what I'm saying is relevant or is probably more relevant to larger councils that insource this work.
Thank you.
So we need to do that, just add maybe a recommendation to commencing for the 24-25.
Yeah, those words we set in brackets or in the same sentence. So 24, 25 if possible, and suitable index, you want to put in brackets out for suitable index, subject to consultation with the auditor or something, because you don't have problems down the track.
Okay, thanks very much. Again, Martin, his hand up there.
Martin.
Thank you. Apologies, Mr. Chair. I'll just have to seek a leave of absence. I've got to jump off to another appointment. So good to see you all again. And apologies I can't be there for the whole meeting, but you're in good hands with Ros and Yoshi.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've dealt with the proposed resolution. We just need someone to move and second. Mayor McCarthy, Councillor Dan. All those in favour? Bruce, thank you. Carrie? I'm looking forward to that. We will move on. So we've dealt with 3.5. 3.6 is the debt recovery policy. So this is an update in our policy documents. If I start, Erin's doing some work with this document. She's clearly marked out the document in terms of the edits proposed. Any comments from staff? If not, I'll open it to members of the audit committee for his Councillor Van.
Just one relatively simple formatting issue. I think that's just easy to overlook. In 5.3, overdue letter and final notice is changed to overdue notice and final letter, which is fine. So we should do the same for 6.3.
Overdue notice and final letter, 6.3. Yes, we should. Okay, so that's the minor change to the heading in 6.3. Is there anything else? I know Chris had a couple of queries. Chris?
Yeah, so I had just for the benefit of the committee, John and I spoke yesterday, and I just made some observations to him about this policy. And I've been thinking about it overnight, and it's almost like in one part you're more conservative than me, and in the other part you're less than conservative than me, so it probably cancels each other out. But I'll mention it anyway. So I'm actually more used to a situation where in the government and local governments I've worked in, where if a person commits to a payment plan and honours that payment plan, so I'm talking about clause 5.1.5, fines and interest won't continue to accumulate. But at the same time, in 5.1.4, you've got the arrangement is considered to be in default and effectively called in if there's two consecutive payments that are missed. And that's generous for mine on two fronts, because you could have two non-consecutive payments that are missed. But also it's typically one strike and you're out. Is what I'm used to seeing. So in one respect, you're harsher, but in another respect, you're more generous. John also mentioned that the interest rate is set by the South Australian government. It's not discretionary, and it's actually probably lower than I would like, in terms of being lower than potentially credit card interest rates, lower than the general interest charge from the tax office, and other things. So in the hierarchy of who do I pay first, council's a bit limited in where they sit in that. So I know there's not a lot this committee or council can do about that, but that doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. But I guess my experience has also been that these are often political judgment calls, and elected representatives, as advocates of the community, are best positioned to go, well, okay, where do we balance financial sustainability with, how our community is faring, particularly as John mentioned to me that, obviously being a large rural community, or a largely rural community, I should say. And you're subject to drought, flood, and fire, and all these sorts of things, which can affect the viability of a lot of your agricultural businesses, and then have flow-on effects for businesses in town, in inverted commas. So I guess I don't have a position as such. I'm probably just throwing all that on the table. And just, see what Councillor Dan and the Mayor in particular, as the elected representatives in the room, what your thoughts are in response to all of that.
And before I ask them that, can I just make a couple of comments? I agree that we should be heavily influenced by council members on this one. Chris is right, we did talk about it. Chris, I reflected a little bit more after our discussion. If we look at 514, your comment about two consecutive payments, again, this is probably a little bit what school you went to, and I know what the practice has been where you've been. I made the comment yesterday, I don't think that two is unusual in South Australia. My experience is you miss two is probably more common than missing one. I have a little bit of a concern about missing only, it seems to me it depends a little bit on how frequent the instalments are. If the instalments were annual, then I would credit twos too many. If they were monthly, then if someone's been away or missed a mail 1 month, you don't want them to be strung up for one short-term oversight. So I'm probably on balance more comfortable with the two than the one, for what it's worth. The 515 fines and interest will still apply for late payment. Again, it would be more common, in my experience, is that councils do apply fines and interest on arrears than not. But again, I'd say as part of the negotiations, and it might be covered in your hardship policy, councils often offer to waive that interest if people stick to the instalment arrangements, but they understand that the fines will be applied if they don't meet their instalment. So there's a bit of incentive to pay early. So I'll leave that with elected members to work out what they want to do. That would be the most common arrangement that I've seen. The one query that we didn't talk about yesterday that I wanted to raise today, 522, which I acknowledge is based on the legislation. I didn't check the Act. If an instalment is not paid when it falls due, then it will incur a fine of 2% of the amount. I'm not sure that is quite right. If you have a monthly instalment arrangement, you don't get 2% added per month. It's I think it's an annual sort of flat fee, and it's 2% flat fee plus there's an interest. You don't get additional every time. In other words, if it was 12 monthly instalments, you'd be charging a lot more than if it was one annual rate. I think the word in the Act is meant to apply on the annual balance outstanding, adjusted per month if need be. But I don't think that 2% could be read as we leave it at for every instalment additional. I don't think that's right.
I can certainly look at that, John.
Yeah. I'm happy if you can just look at it, and it might be a bit of clarification.
And certainly what I can say further to some of the comments, with the fines and interest charged, if someone's on a payment plan, the ratepayer absolutely has the ability to request for that to be waived due to their circumstances, and that decision sits with the CEO. So people do have that ability to state their case and for to look at that on a case-by-case basis. And we're certainly very aware at the moment, particularly in this area, due to the drought, of treading carefully when it comes to recovering aged debts and really taking into account also the individual circumstances. But also, obviously, it's difficult because the longer someone has an amount outstanding, the harder it is for them to get anywhere. So we're certainly trying to into arrangement of some payment, just so that debt is decreasing, because at the end of the day, you're not helping that person in the long term.
You want to decrease, you want regular payments, you want regular discussion, and you want people to feel that they can talk to you and work out a plan. Yes. Otherwise, the experience is they will forget about it, they will live in denial, they'll put their head in the bucket and try and block it out, and it just becomes a bigger problem. So you don't want that to happen. I'd probably suggest, rather than the words 5 in 515, you say will apply, will still apply. I'd probably say maybe waive, and the implication is it will apply, but it could be waived if you wanted to, would be my. This doesn't theoretically give someone the power to waive those fines if they strictly apply to the policy. Whereas if it said may be waived, doesn't mean it will be waived, but I have to leave that with you. So there's probably 3 things that Chris and I have raised. One is about 514, whether it's 2 consecutive or 1. 515 we've just talked about, and we've talked about 522, 2% per instalment. My view is we've given you feedback, and it's Chris's point, and I agree with. It's a judgment call from the elected representative.
Yeah, can I just add something to that, John, and what was said by the staff? Perhaps the threshold for waiving is that the amount that people commit to is, I don't know, is what gets them ahead of the, which I think is what you were saying anyway, is what gets them ahead of the debt. But then you sort of get into the stage of, oh well, you're condemning those that can't afford it to getting further behind. So, that's always the counter argument I've gotten from elected members in that respect. But as a general rule, the people who approach council to actually set up the payment plans, who are proactive about it, actually want to get rid of the debt and actually see the logic in doing that anyway, in terms of actually setting it up to get ahead. Or, as I mentioned to you yesterday, John, the example of our cane farmers here that align their rates payments to when the mill pays them. I don't know if there's an equivalent for your farmers down there where, after they go to market with their produce, that's when they pay. I don't know, but maybe there's some local sort of, circumstances that can be applied to it.
Exactly. You want bigger payments when the wheat check is due to paying, etc. You need to do all of that. To me, and I've had this experience with this sort of thing when I was CEO of a large outlet council in Adelaide. The initial letter is the key one. Rather than be threatening and intimidating when people just get annoyed and ignore it, you want it to be warm. We want to help you. Get in touch with us and we'll work out a plan. It's in your interest to do so. That's the hardest bit, and that's what you've got to get right.
We've definitely just, into our letters recently have changed the wording to really encourage, please reach out and contact us.
That's what you
should. Just to get that communication going and have them feel comfortable to make contact.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just some thoughts from a councillor. I thought the 2 consecutive defaults or mispayments, underpayments, late payments, I thought that was okay. I read 5.1.5 differently and perhaps made a mistake. I thought that the intent of that was, even if you're on a repayment plan, if you don't meet your repayment plan, then fines and interest will start to kick in.
That's the common practice by the
So you can, let's just say you can't pay your rates, but you agree that you will pay 1/12 every month throughout the year. And you might agree, okay, no problem, no fine, no interest. But if you then start to default on that, then the fines and interest. So that's how I read it, maybe incorrectly. But so really, to contribute to the conversation, that's where I would encourage the words to take us, the plan to take us, so that if you default on your agreed plan, then they start to come in.
Yeah, that was my position.
It doesn't get you out of that stuff. The point that Chris made about 523, and I didn't look at the Local Government Finance Association cash advance bench rate, so I didn't look to see whether that was high or low or whatever it is. But if it's not quite right, presumably we can still.
No, it is right. That's what the
I'm sorry. If the level of it, where it is not quite right, presumably can we adjust the 3%?
No, that's
So that's okay. All right.
Parliament has made sure that councils can't profit from this,
Okay.
and they effectively get compensated for their costs if they have a cash flow problem and a raise that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then the last thing, which I read, and I wasn't going to raise, but since this has come up, was the legal action. So 543, removing the ability to charge legal costs. I'm not saying that's right or it's wrong. When I read it, I thought, not too sure that I feel strongly enough about this to make a comment. But since we're talking about all of these things, maybe just help me out. What's the reason for saying we will charge interest, but we won't charge legal costs if they exist?
My reading of it is that if you incur costs, if you go to a debt collection agency, costs mount up. Okay, so just to avoid that if you can, but if the unfortunate ratepayer's got to that stage, then if it goes to the next step where you've actually threatened the sale of the property, there will only be certain legal costs, certain costs that you can charge as a debt due to you. If you use a debt collection agency that's got some cost that's perhaps a bit more energetic, shall we say, in its recovery than is the legally required, you can't get that back. You can't get back everything you've spent. You get back all the rest that you are.
As I read it, and again, I might not have it right, but it does actually, all legal costs are removed. So I understand the principle of you can't go to the most expensive lawyer, you can't just let these costs mount up, because it wouldn't be right to do that without due care for the supposed to pay. But this removes all legal costs. So what happens if you do not?
No, only the fees that are advised to be recoverable.
I think it's just rewording it more appropriately to say that we cannot recover all costs, only those that are recoverable. So it's removing that all and changing the words.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry to slow the meeting down.
It is confusing reading the website.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah, sorry, just going further to that point about clause 5.4.3. So who decides what's recoverable versus not recoverable? Is that spelled out in the acts or the regulation, or is that in council's schedule of fees and charges? Or is that subjective? Where's that determined?
I believe that we determine it. I believe whether it comes from the act or the debt collection agency, it advise what we can recover.
And whether there's, I'm not familiar with anything in the Act, but so whether it's a court precedent ruling, I don't know, but the rules are, as Councillor Dan summarised it nicely, you can recover the cost you have necessarily incurred, but you can't recover costs more than that, e.g. by going through a QC and paying a premium, you can't get that. What would you had to reasonably incur is the answer.
Yeah, like it sounds to me like a bit of a sort of reasonable and relevant test, but I'd just be wanting the comfort of knowing that, so there'd be an initial fee for a debt recovery agency potentially to take on a file. Then every time they send correspondence, if they file with, small claims or the magistrate's court or whatever, all of those steps that incur either direct cost to them or on cost because of filing fees or whatever, I just want to know that that's all considered reasonable and relevant and therefore recoverable.
And look, now when I'm thinking about it, I suspect it's not anything to do with the Low Going Act. I suspect there's another piece of legislation covering debt recovery that you've got to follow and adhere to when you're recovering debts that are being any debt when you've engaged a debt recovery agency, what you can recover and what you can't.
And I don't believe that we get charged from the debt recovery agency unless they have success.
Sorry, say that again.
I don't believe we get charged by the debt recovery agency unless they have success in recovering monies.
Oh, okay, yes, I have seen that. Yeah, okay.
Those agreements have high fees attached.
Exactly.
They recover debt plus 10%.
Members, is there anything else? Can I suggest, particularly given what Chris made, that I agree with that this is an issue for the council primarily, the resolution not spell out we want this or that, but rather that we just have a resolution that says the committee discuss the merits of various issues, including ... And we're happy with the policy after council's consideration of those above matters. Just so the council can then work out whether it wishes to make some changes or not. And the ... would be about 2 consecutive payments or not. It's about the fines on arrears, and it's about that 2% issue clarification.
Was there to be an adjustment to the wording based on the potential, difference in interpretation between in that clause Councillor Dan raised? I mean, it sounded like him and I were in agreement on what it should say, but we were differing on how we interpreted it. So is there something that needs to be amended there or clarified there?
Is that on 5.4.3 or sorry, which falls in that one?
No, that was 5.1.5, I think, wasn't it?
Well, I think probably actually both.
5.1.5, is it?
Yeah, fines and interest will still apply for late payment, even when a payment plan is in place. I interpreted that to mean we'll continue to charge fines and interest even if you're honouring a payment plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Dan, but your interpretation of that was that it would only be if you default on a payment plan. But then we were in agreement that it should be used as an incentive in the first instance. So, which is obviously something you can take to the council table, but I don't know, is there a way to, that we can sharpen up that wording just so there's not that, two people looking at it coming up with a different conclusion as to what it actually means?
And so I believe we have fines and interest in play even when there is a payment plan. But you're suggesting that whether you'd like that to be re-looked at, that if they're in a payment plan, and I certainly agree that to try and have someone get ahead to not have the fines and interest, and the fines and interest is only if you default. Is that what we?
Well, that's all my head.
Yeah,
Chris is saying that is the same.
And that's why I'm saying perhaps a little bit of wiggle room for Ros to deliberate on the feedback she's had today with the report that goes to council is what I prefer. And I just did a slight difference to what Councillor Dan and Chris said. I talked about maybe ways, which sort of left the door open to cover those issues. So I just say that I'd go for ... you know, a little bit more clarification about what's in 515 on whether the fines are automatically waived or not, or there's discretion. You know, is it black or white, or is there some greyness and discretion in there?
Can I give some thoughts on the point? Ros. So what I've got in my head is the first point is the negotiation of the payment plan.
Yes.
It might be that if one ratepayer says, can I pay you a 12th a month throughout the year, the CEO might say, that'll be fine, no interest, no fines, so long as you stick to it. If you let us down, we're back to square one. Another ratepayer might say, I'd like to pay you all of it on the last day of the year. In 12 months' time, I want to pay you all of it. The payment plan might be, okay, but that's you will have to pay some interest if you want to do that. That would be all part of the negotiation with the CEO about what is the payment plan. And I think it's appropriate for the CEO to have that flexibility. One person, it might be, look, I can pay everything, but I'm only going to be 2 months late. I'll pay the whole year's worth. Or another person, I'll pay you. Like, let him have that flexibility to develop a plan. But then this says, if you default on the plan, whatever it was agreed, then you are back into fees and fines that we've normally applied. That's where my head's at.
I understand. And my suggestion, maybe way that will cover that. But leave with Ros is clear what we want now. So for you to think a little bit more flexibly about black, white, or grey with 515, you're going to clarify whether the 2% I read it right is per instalment. Is that what your intention is? And if so, I'm querying whether that's appropriate.
That's meant to be 2%.
I think it is. And the other one I think was that 543 probably does need a little bit more clarification about what that means. I think they were the main, the other one was 514, whether it is two payments, 2 consecutive payments or one. I think again that's perhaps if it's an annual payment, that might be different than if it's a monthly payment.
And I believe with a lot of the policies, and certainly this one obviously has been in place for a while, is now being amended, but we do tend to try and look at other councils' policies as well. Not that you necessarily go just based on that, but just to see what comes. Yeah.
You would want to have policies that are similar to councils with similar circumstances.
That's correct.
Primarily primary production with, variable, rainfall conditions. It's not the same as some parts of the state where the income is going to be more regular.
Yes.
Chris, are we okay?
And I mean, ultimately, all these issues will be litigated by the council, and they can apply the local factors, which is, basically the outcome. I was sort of wanting to drive towards. So I'm comfortable with all of that.
The resolution will be to give consideration to these points in drafting a report to council for adoption. Okay. Sorry, just a bit of a random question. I appreciate if the officers don't have this at their fingertips, but how's the council actually tracking in terms of people falling behind on their rates? Are they sort of industry average, better than industry average, worse than industry average?
I don't have any comparisons. I do know, obviously you're aware that our rates officer was previously outsourced and then go back in. Something the outsourcing that the person did do very well was she managed the rates and the outstanding debt very well, and had that communication with the ratepayers, progressed through market recruitment, anything that led to debt collection. So we're in a very good process with that, but I just don't have the comparisons for other councils. I don't know, because I don't know that information is something that councils post online. No, to be able to even.
It's not in the monthly financials then.
Yeah. So there's a couple of points here. I think one, I understand that we're starting to see some more contact from some ratepayers experiencing some challenges. But I don't know at this point in my conversation with Martin that we're seeing any alarming deterioration in payments. So that's the first point. The second point is we have what we call the Flinders Alliance. I think we've given you some description of that, which is the 6 local councils, including us. And it's a conversation that Martin was having through that with other CEOs as to how they're managing these things as well. So he would probably be able to respond to that if he was here today, but we've got nothing formal from those other councils to benchmark at this point in time.
Yeah, fair enough. No, that's okay. I just thought you might have some info, but that's all right. Yeah, no, put the report through.
Okay, members, just to wrap things up, so we've got recommendation on page 51, received another report, recommends the council that the revised debt recovery policy as presented that it be adopted. I'll probably say something subject to further consideration of ... and ... might be a paragraph on each of those issues. Yeah. Someone prepared to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Dan, seconded by Chris Kelly. No further discussion. All those in favour? Chris Kelly.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Easy. Keep moving. We're up to item 3.7, the proposed 25-26 audit and risk committee work program. Now, this one I think is pretty well identical to the one we're currently using. Is there any concerns or questions, comments, members?
No, he talked about the long-term financial planning documents and the budget and stuff, and the risk thing, which I raised at the beginning of the meeting. So yeah, I'm comfortable from where I stand.
And my only, in the minutes, it's just where we've got X, is where X hasn't been achieved. I just would like to see a comment, and that doesn't have to be, we're not locked in here. If there's a good reason to vary it, even if the good reason is we're just behind because of other issues, just say so in the comments, etc., etc. Yeah.
And also, just for your information, so Yoshi hasn't prepared the work program, possibly will moving forward. It was an external person who's prepared it, so I didn't want to.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. So Yoshi, to be clear, we think this is about right. When you've worked out what you need to do in terms of peaks and troughs, if you think, hang on, I really like that one, slip back a little bit, because this one has to be done by legislation or whatever. Come back and propose changes, and then we're probably going to be sympathetic to that, so don't feel locked in.
John, just for your suggestion, maybe we only have X's into the future.
That's exactly right.
So
that's what I said.
Today decided completed or moved to another date.
Or decide
some kind.
That's right. There's no X's in the past.
Yeah. Maybe that's the easy.
So it's either occurred or it's going to.
It's commented on, or it's a future X.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
been delayed, pushed forward,
yeah,
commented on, whatever. There's no X's in the past. Members, if we're happy with that, there's a recommendation received that report endorsed proposed audit and work program. Happy? Ms. Stephen, seconded. Councillor Dan, all those in favour?
The timing.
I was looking at Chris and he had his hand up. All those in favour? Carry. Right, so the last report we've got on the agenda is item 3.8, the corporate credit cards. Standard item, I think, check, you're all on the website. Any comments, members? I can move that recommendation. Or Chris is moving it, seconded by Mayor Stephen. All those in favour? Carry. Okay, that deals with 3.8. If we keep going, then there's no other reports, there's no correspondence, no confidential items. Now, the next meeting is scheduled for the 19th of August. But as was highlighted earlier, we are going to need another meeting before then, particularly to deal with the annual business plan. Very told me before the meeting that he's hoping to have an update of the long-term financial plan, prepared at the same time as the budget is prepared. Say that draft budget or for consultation or the one for adoption. We as a board committee need to have a meeting to endorse or provide feedback and hopefully endorsement of the proposed annual business plan budget. In a perfect world, we do that before the document is released for consultation. If that's not possible, we might have to do it during the consultation period. But I'm in staff's hands. Can we be a bit more specific, possibly, about when the timing of those documents?
I'm not sure the time frames at all, John, so.
I'd be very keen for us to manage the process so that we do before we go to public consultation, because I'm going to, I'm going to change, and we'll be going around like we did last year, the community, having those conversations. So I'd be much more comfortable with the actually against.
Exactly. It's a bit awkward that the audit committee had a different view that the document was released for public consultation. Yeah. So I would prefer that, and that might mean that the document that's released for public consultation is delayed a bit from what was originally anticipated. And there's plenty of time to do that, but it's not the end of the earth if you don't get the public the draft out there in June. I think technically it would happen late August, but I'm suggesting we do that. So the answer is you will continue to work on the draft annual business plan, and we will see it before it is released, and our next meeting will be scheduled to accommodate that.
And as we have the 27th and 28th of this month, so the dates for public consultation, and that we can't do that.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, once Martin's able to talk again after this treatment, we'll come back.
Yeah, all good, all good. Are we all happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so for the minutes, can you just make next meeting, a special meeting will be held for the Audit and Risk Committee to review the draft annual business plan / budget for its release.
Sorry, John, can I just flag something? Wednesdays are our council meetings and briefings here at Mackay, so it would be difficult for me to participate on a Wednesday, and given that might raise quorum issues, I just, for you guys, not for me, because I'm not a member of my council here, I just probably just throw that on the table. I mean, I can make myself available at short notice, just Wednesdays will be a struggle.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's the other factor, of course. We've got to find a date that works for all of us as well. And so if we get the long-term financial plan done and the draft annual business plan, Yoshi was also intimating to me before the meeting that he'd hoped to update the asset management plan to at least review the projected capital expenditure consistent with the budget. So it doesn't have to be a full new asset management plan from scratch. It might just be pretty much the old one with some updated figures. If you're satisfied there's nothing else wrong with it, it's fine. So we might see that as well as part of that process. But I can live with that if we have to, without that if we have to. Okay, so the minutes will just note that we our proposed next meetings. Anything else, members, before we close?
If what may to use the knowledge here, nothing to do with our meeting today, but who sets the dates on our rates for payments per quarter? Are they mandated 7 days?
No, they're not specified dates. They go in, off the top of my head, long since I've done this. But the answer is the depends when your budget is adopted. It's I think it's 2 months. The rates won't be due for, I'll say, 2 months after adoption of or after the rates notice goes out, which is a day or two after the budget's adopted. So,
well, that helps, because I just noticed that the last quarter will be the 13th/6, which doesn't leave a lot of time for the conclusion of the financial year for those numbers to be recorded.
so
So the last payment date for paid by the quarter,
you're talking 24/5.
yeah,
Okay, 24/5. Last date is
13/6.
yes.
So it does not leave a lot of time between then and the closure of 30 June.
Yes.
For payments.
What will happen, normally you close off your accounts, I'll say a week after the end of the year for those things, but the income will be shown as the 100%. You might have the cash, but the cash will be right as at the date that you close the books. And it might be a little bit different than what was actually happening up down the track. Yep.
Okay, cool.
All manageable. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so look, just to finish up the story, so the last day for quarterly payments would be the 30 June next year, blah, blah, blah. So that's why the budget has to be adopted in August and it goes from there.
Okay, yep, no, you've answered that, thank you.
Okay, Chris, nothing else from you?
No, all good from here. I'll just wait to hear if you need clarifications on any of the resolutions, and yeah, make myself available for the next meeting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, good, thanks for coming.
All good. Thank you, my pleasure. I'll declare the meeting closed at 12:26. Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you, Chris.
See you, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.